Welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast
with our mom,
Misty Bailey. Tips and encouragement
for
real-life homeschooling
is
is
headed your
way.
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I am Misty Bailey, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about, it was originally supposed to be 10 things, but I think by the time I'm all done, there's going to be 15 or more things that I don't do in my homeschool. I have heard other podcasters do this, and I think it's super fun to hear what things that other people don't do in their homeschool, because I think oftentimes we compare what we do to what other people do, and we never look at the things that they don't do, right? And this list may kind of surprise you. So before we do that, though, I just want to remind you to head over to iTunes or whatever platform it is that you use to listen to this podcast and leave a rating and review. So these ratings and reviews truly help other homeschool moms find this podcast, and it helps tell the powers to be that I'm not talking to myself. So, in addition to that, if you do leave a rating or review, there is a pretty good chance that you may hear your review on this podcast. So, today's review comes from DMM0730. And the review says, "Fun and relatable. Such a fun podcast. Misty and her guests are relatable as homeschool moms. I learned a lot." Thank you so much for that 5-star review. And as a thank you, I want to ask you to shoot me an email, misty@joyinthejourney.net, and I will send you over a thank you coupon for my store. So make sure you leave that review, and you might hear your review read on the podcast. So without further ado, let's dive right into an unknown number of things that I don't do in my homeschool. So the first one is plan ahead. So I've shared this before on the blog that I don't really plan ahead when it comes to our homeschool. So I do the super simple homeschool planning method, which started out as a 5-subject notebook that I learned about from Sarah McKenzie. And I more or less just open the book and write down the next lesson for the kids to do each day. So at the beginning of the school year, I do have a general idea of where we need to be at the end of each quarter in each book, but I don't really write out these massive plans and plan months in advance. We pretty much go day by day, because for me, life happens, things happen, and I cannot stand a homeschool planner marked off with ink pen. And that's another thing. I don't even use a homeschool planner. I use homeschool mom planning sheets, which are free on the blog. I will leave a link to those in the show notes. And I also have homeschool planners for the students that you can use with the super simple homeschool planning method. And I will leave that in the show notes as well. But I do not plan ahead. And you can find the show notes at joyfullyhomeschooling.com and click on episode 22. So the next thing I don't do in my homeschool is use a reading curriculum after phonics. So after my girls learned how to read, we never really used a full reading curriculum. There were 2 years that we used the Spectrum reading books, the comprehension books, and we used those in our homeschool for 2 years. I believe it was Allison's 2nd and 3rd grade year, and I believe we used them in Kristen's 2nd grade year. But we never really used them past that. And the reason being is I cannot stand reading curriculums. Like, I tried a few. We tried Total Language Plus, which is a reading and grammar and everything program. But my kids cannot stand to have these books dissected and to go super slow through the books and take their time. They like to be able to open a book and read. And I have readers. My girls love to read. And on their standardized test scores, if that matters, they both score off the charts in reading comprehension. And we've never used a reading curriculum ever, really, after they've learned how to read. I don't plan on using a reading program with Daniel either. For me, I would rather my girls and Daniel have a love of literature, have a love of reading. And sometimes I think reading programs kind of take that love out of it and they turn it into work. And that has just never worked for us. So in addition to that, going along with that, is we've never done book reports, really. I've never really assigned book reports. I do remember in Allison's second or third grade year, her doing a book report, and she did it for the library. So the library and her girls reading group, they had to do a book report, and she dressed up in this little dress, and she went up there and did a book report on the Magic Tree House. And it was the pioneer book of the Magic Tree House, and she wore a blue dress just like the character in the book, and she loved it. But as far as assigning book reports, we've never done that. Again, it goes back to not wanting to squelch my kids' love for reading. And for my girls, at least, that is exactly what that does, because I've talked to them about it. I've tried it. It's never worked for my girls. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to be just fine. So the next thing we don't really do in our homeschool is teach spelling. So I have the best of intentions with this. So we have used the Rod and Staff spelling books. We used those for a couple years. But nothing ever really stuck. It was one of those things that we got to whenever we had the time. So then I heard great things about Spelling Power. And I got that book. And that book really is awesome. I mean, it looks phenomenal. But we maybe get to it with each kid once a week. It's just not something we've really pushed. And I would love to say my girls are great spellers, but they're not really. They're not. They could probably have benefited from a spelling program, but we've just not done it. They test fine. They don't test off the charts in spelling, but I've just never really taught spelling that well in our homeschool. So yeah, there's that. So the next thing we don't do in our homeschool is I don't keep grades for the kids before 6th grade. So before 6th grade, I more or less just check their work. We've never really kept grades or done the A's and B's and all of that fun stuff. But I do start breaking into that in about 6th grade. And we just start off at first with math and language arts. And then as they go into 7th grade, then we start keeping grades in history and science. So we don't really do grades before that. We don't do school on field trip or co-op days. Sometimes we get language arts and math in, sometimes, but most of the time we don't do much of anything else except field trip and co-ops. So the next thing we don't do is art or messy crafts. And this is really bad for my middle because my middle loves art. She loves it. And one time we asked her, we talked to the kids sometimes about what they want to see in their homeschool, what they liked or what they didn't like about their year. And one year she said that she wishes that she could go to public school to go to art class because she loves art. So instead, because I'm not an art person at all, we tried an art curriculum one year, and I've got a review of it on the blog, creating the masterpiece. And it was a great art program. But I'm not an artist. I don't really make the time for art. We've also tried Schoolhouse Teachers art, and that is what Kristen does whenever she's not in her art classes. So we do art classes one semester. The place is about a half an hour away from here. So we don't do it all year round. And she loves it. She loves going there for art. And whenever we're not doing that, then she takes Schoolhouse Teachers art classes. But I don't teach art, and we don't do messy crafts. Whenever Daniel was a baby, I hired a girl from our church who was an art major to come in twice a month and do messy art crafts with the girls. She did like paper mache and things. I don't do that anymore because I figure they get art from their art classes if they're interested in it. And then we do have a wonderful art teacher at our co-op that teaches art once a month, and they get it there. But I have never myself personally taught art or done messy crafts in our homeschool because that's just not me. Glitter is like a nightmare for me, and as is paint and all that other messy stuff. So the next thing I don't do in our homeschool is after those field trips and fun things, we don't keep those fancy field trip sheets or journals. I got one from Apologia at the 2-to-1 conference, and I had full intentions on using it. Super cool. Loved it. I'm like, this is a great idea. Never used it. I have a field trip sheet in the back of my homeschool planners that I offer on my store, but they don't really get filled out all of the time, but they're there in case you buy the planner and you want to do it. But we've just never done that. We've never wrote out the fancy things about what they loved on the field trip or had them take notes or anything like that. We just go, we come home, and that's it.
We are interrupting this episode to thank Beautiful Feet Books for sponsoring the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. We have used a couple of the Beautiful Feet Books packs, and the History of the Horse set turned my history-dreading daughter into a history lover. It is now her favorite subject of the day. Learn more about our sponsor, Beautiful Feet Books, by heading to bfbooks.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. Now on to the episode.
I don't do the dissection or the messy science stuff. My husband does. Allison went through human anatomy from Apologia, and it was recommended that she do a dissection of some sort. We never did it. I never forced her. I have no plans on ever forcing her to do a dissection in any way, shape, or form. Kristen, however, loves it. She's my vet science person. And so my husband helps with that, but I don't plan on making my kids dissect things at all. So another thing I don't do in my homeschool is whenever the girls were younger, we did the fun circle time songs. So we did all that fun circle time stuff. We did the pledge and everything. And then Daniel came along, the daycare ended, and we've not done that. I don't know that Daniel knows the Pledge of Allegiance. That's really bad. I'm actually kind of embarrassed confessing that right now. So remind me to make sure I work on that this school year. He may know it from Bible school. I don't know. I'll have to find out, and I'll keep you guys updated on whether or not he knows that. So, but we've not done it. The girls got older, and it's just not as much fun doing the fun circle time songs with 2 older sisters, and you're the only young one. We tried it a couple times, and he just looked at me like, Mom, are you seriously making me do this? I'm by myself on this carpet. So, we never kept on with it. So we do circle time, or morning time is what we call it, where we read the Bible and stuff together and we talk about our day. But in the traditional preschool, fun, elementary sense, Daniel never got that. He was totally gypped. So, the next thing I don't do in my homeschool is we no longer have a schoolroom. And I'm actually kind of bummed about this because our schoolroom was awesome. It was great. I've got blog posts and videos, and it was phenomenal. But as the girls got older, reality sank in, and them doing school in the same room as their ADHD brother was not happening. So it was normally just me and Daniel in the schoolroom, and the girls went off to their own rooms, and we were keeping it was taking up a lot of space, having their stuff in their room and them not actually using it. So instead, we now do school in our dining room, and it's worked out fine. So the girls go to their own place, and then I do school with Daniel in the dining room, and that's it. So we no longer have a schoolroom, which kind of makes me sad, but I know I'm not alone out there in the schoolroom realm. So the last thing I want to share that we don't do in our homeschool is with the girls. I never did the fun math manipulative stuff that we do with Daniel. So they never got the little blocks or any hands-on really math. We never really used it with them. I had the stuff, but they caught on to it without it. And for me, it was just, in my mind, it was just busy work that they didn't really need. So I would actually, when we would math curriculum shop, avoid curriculums that required a lot of the hands-on math manipulatives because I didn't want to mess with them. However, with Daniel, we have used them a lot. And the girls, I feel sometimes they think they got gypped a little bit, that I'm a much more fun homeschool mom with him. But he's needed it. He's needed the hands-on resources. He has needed the manipulatives. He's needed the tactile things. And the girls didn't. They did just fine. School was never hard for them. They always just went along with it. We never had any issues. So whenever he came along and there were struggles, I didn't really know what to do. But we started utilizing the math manipulatives and resources and stuff, and they've worked out great for him. But the girls never got that. So I guess it kind of ends up working itself out, right? They got the fun circle time stuff, but they didn't get the fun math. So in the end, it all works out. So there you have it. I'm not entirely sure how many things that was, or even if I got to them all, but that is quite a few things that I don't do in my homeschool. So I'm sure there are things on my list that your jaw dropped and you were like, oh my goodness, how do you not do those things? But I guarantee if you stop and think, there's probably things in your homeschool that you don't do that I do. And I think that's one thing we need to remind ourselves when we look at Instagram and Facebook and other blogs and all of those other wonderful moms that we think are so much better at homeschooling than we are, that there are going to be things they don't do that we do. And there are going to be things that we do that they don't do. And we can just ditch the comparison right out the door because we're all doing the absolute best we can for our kids and homeschooling them. And I guarantee in the end, as long as we do our best, our kids are going to turn out absolutely fine. And my best is going to be different than your best. And your best is going to be different than my best. But in the end, we all want what's best for our kids. And we're going to do whatever we can to give them that. So that is it for this episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I would love it if you would share with me on Instagram or shoot me an email of some things that you don't do in your homeschool. And you can share those things using the hashtag Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast, or just shoot me an email, misty@joyinthejourney.net. I would also love it if you'd head over to my store, joyinthejourneystore.net. I have all kinds of fun resources over there. There are some awesome t-shirts that will encourage you, that will showcase your homeschool pride. I have a couple courses, different presentations that I have done at conventions across the country that you can purchase, planners, all sorts of fun stuff. So I would love if you would head over there, check those out, because that helps support this podcast. It helps support my family, and it helps keep me going because let's face it, we have to put food on the table and I have to pay all of these blog and podcast expenses, right? So each purchase that you make truly is a blessing to our family. And if you order a t-shirt, I actually send you a fun picture of my family with a personalized thank you card because it really does mean a lot to me. So that is it. I hope this episode encouraged you to head out and have a more joyful homeschool. Have a great day, guys. Bye. This has been an episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take the time to leave a rating or review on iTunes or whatever platform it is that you use to listen to this podcast. That tells the powers to be I'm not talking to myself. Also, hit subscribe. Then you will catch every episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast each week right there in your podcast feed. You can find show notes and more at joyfullyhomeschooling.com and clicking on the episode number of the episode you are looking for. Thanks, guys. I hope this podcast encouraged you to head out there and have a more joyful homeschool.